Why more men are quietly walking away from modern dating. A man, mid-30s, decent job, emotionally stable, genuinely kind, deletes his dating apps on a Tuesday afternoon. No dramatic backstory, no bitter breakup, no traumatic event. He just stops. He makes coffee, opens a book, and feels something he hasn't felt in months: relief. And here's what's strange: he's not alone. Across the world, quietly, without protest or manifesto, millions of men are doing the exact same thing. Not with anger, not with resentment, just with this quiet, exhausted recognition that the game has changed, and they're no longer interested in playing it. So the question isn't, why are men failing at dating? The real question is, why are so many men deciding it's no longer worth trying? Meet James. James is 31. He's been on dating apps for 4 years. He works out, has his own apartment, reads actual books, and by any reasonable measure is a solid human being. He's been on maybe 60 dates in those 4 years. A handful of relationships that lasted a few months before fizzling out for reasons he could never quite articulate. And somewhere along the way, between the ghosting, the situationships, the women who seemed interested until they weren't, and the constant low-level performance anxiety of trying to be enough, something inside him quietly switched off. He didn't rage about it online. He didn't blame women. He just started investing that energy somewhere else. The gym, his friendships, a side business he'd been putting off. And the wild part? He's never been happier. James isn't broken. James isn't a failure. James is a data point in one of the most underreported cultural shifts of our generation. Here's what James's story reveals. Modern dating, for a significant portion of men, has become a high-cost, low-reward experience, and they're responding the way any rational person responds to a bad investment. They're pulling their capital out. This isn't about toxic masculinity. It isn't about men being unwilling to put in effort. It's about something more fundamental. The return on emotional investment has dropped so low that many men have decided the whole enterprise isn't worth it. And before you dismiss that as excuses, consider this. The same psychological principle that explains why people stop gambling when the losses pile up also explains why men are logging off of Hinge. It's called learned helplessness. When your effort repeatedly produces no outcome, or worse, produces humiliation, your brain eventually stops generating effort at all. It's not weakness, it's adaptation. So how did we get here? 3 systems quietly dismantled the traditional architecture of dating, and nobody bothered to build something to replace it. First, dating apps turned human beings into products. When you swipe on someone, you're not engaging with a person. You're auditing a profile. You're making split-second judgments about someone's entire romantic value based on curated photographs and a 2-line bio. And the apps are designed, deliberately designed, to keep you swiping rather than connecting. Because a successful match that leads to a relationship is a user they lose. The business model depends on your loneliness. For women, this created an environment of overwhelming choice. For men, specifically average men, which is most men, it created a near-total collapse of response rates. Studies have shown that the bottom 78% of men on these platforms are competing for the bottom 22% of female attention. That's not hyperbole, that's the actual math. Second, social media changed the baseline expectation. When every person you follow is presenting a highlight reel of their most attractive, most successful, most magnetic self, your standards recalibrate to fiction. Real people with real insecurities and real Tuesday afternoons start to feel like disappointments before you've even met them. The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass isn't even real. It's a filter. Third, the cultural script for men was rewritten, but no new script was handed out. For decades, men were told exactly what was expected of them in relationships. Be strong, be a provider, be consistent. Was that script perfect? Absolutely not, but at least it was a script. Now, men are told to be emotionally vulnerable but not needy, ambitious but not obsessive, confident but not arrogant, present but not clingy, strong but not domineering, funny but not immature. And if they get that balance wrong in any direction, they're out. There's no room for learning, no tolerance for awkwardness, no grace period for growth. The bar is invisible, constantly moving, and you only find out where it was after you've already failed to clear it. Realization 1. Effort without feedback destroys motivation. Think about any skill you've ever tried to learn. You improved because you got feedback. You understood what worked and what didn't. Dating, as it's currently structured, provides almost none of that. You get ghosted. You get no explanation. You're just gone from someone's life without ceremony or closure. Do that enough times and your brain doesn't conclude that you need to try harder. It concludes that trying is pointless. Realization 2. Men aren't walking away from women. They're walking away from a process that makes them feel worthless. This is the part that gets lost in every conversation about this topic. It gets framed as men being lazy or entitled or afraid of commitment. But the more accurate description is that men are human beings who have been demoralized by a system that treats them as disposable until proven otherwise. And they're responding to demoralization the way all humans do. They're protecting themselves. Realization 3. The loneliest generation of men is also the most self-sufficient. Here's something uncomfortable. Men who walk away from modern dating aren't collapsing. They're building, they're finding purpose in work, fitness, creative projects, friendships, community. They're constructing a life that feels meaningful and discovering along the way that the romantic connection they were conditioned to believe was essential to happiness is not. That's not a red flag. That's a warning signal to a culture that has stopped making room for men's humanity. And here's where it gets deeper. The men who are walking away quietly aren't the broken ones. The broken ones are still swiping, still chasing, still performing. The ones who leave are the ones who developed enough self-awareness to recognize the pattern. They looked at the game, understood the rules, calculated their odds, and made a logical decision. And societies are built in part on men who choose to invest in them, in families, in communities, in future generations. When large numbers of men conclude that those investments aren't worth making, that the emotional, financial, and psychological cost of partnership exceeds whatever it might offer, the consequences ripple outward in ways that aren't immediately visible. We've spent years analyzing female loneliness, female burnout, female exhaustion in relationships. Those conversations are legitimate and necessary, but we've neglected to have the same honest conversation about men, partly because male withdrawal is invisible, partly because male pain is culturally undervalued, and partly because it's easier to pathologize men who disengage than to ask what made them disengage in the first place. Here's a scenario worth sitting with. Marcus is 28. He watched his father pour everything into a marriage that ended in divorce and nearly destroyed him financially and emotionally. He watched his older brother try to navigate modern dating and spiral into anxiety. He went on dates himself, tried to be open, tried to be present, and got burned enough times that he now has a simple policy. He doesn't pursue. He focuses on his life. He stays open, in theory. But he no longer extends himself towards something that has only ever cost him. Is Marcus wrong? Is he damaged? Or is he simply a man who learned from available evidence? Here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Modern dating culture has optimized itself for the beginning, for the spark, for the swipe, for the dopamine hit of a new match, and completely neglected to build anything sustainable in the middle. It's created a generation of people who are extraordinarily good at starting and extraordinarily bad at staying. And men, who are often less verbally expressive about these experiences, have simply voted with their absence. They haven't written manifestos. They haven't organized protests. They've just quietly gone home, turned off the app, and started making something out of the life they already have. You can interpret that as failure. Or you can interpret it as the most honest response available to them. Because here's the thing about a market that consistently undervalues a product. Eventually, the product stops showing up. The men aren't the problem. The market is broken. And until we're willing to have an honest, non-defensive conversation about why, rather than who to blame, we'll keep losing people who had something real to offer, to a silence that nobody heard coming. If this made you think, even if it made you uncomfortable, drop a comment below. What do you think is really driving this shift? And if you're a man who's been through this, or a woman who's watched it happen, your perspective matters here.